there is my panel. Excellent. I have a slight return signal, but I will try to live with that. Hello everybody, thank you for being with us on the first panel of the Luxembourg Internet Days 2020. All virtual, but still nice, crisp, and with plenty of new ideas and new products and services. Let me introduce the panel members. I will not speak about their bios because those people all have bios which you find on the internet site of the event. I have Annika LINCK, which is connected to us from Brussels and from Digital SME. Then I have Raphael from Luxembourg here at EBRC. Xavier Hermès from BC. Steffen from somewhere in Germany. Steffen, I don't remember where you are currently sitting, but you will tell us. And Laurent Allard from the great nation of France. Hello, Laurent.
Hello. Good morning.
Voilà. You have been able to discover, I'm just explaining that briefly for those who will join us on the spot. This year's Luxembourg Internet Days have been set into a completely invented crisis scenario. So we have tried to invent a storyline which to a certain extent bridges the 6 panels which we will have. And the crisis scenario, quickly explained, is that of a menace of cyber-physical attacks on a number of institutions, corporates, down to very down-to-earth, even eventually private persons. And what we will try to see is the impact which such a crisis scenario could have on cloud trends and tendencies in Europe, on what is currently happening in the cloud market. Laurent already gave a very good introduction to that. We will have the occasion to speak about standardization in the cloud market, whether cloud is something which is going to save the world for everybody, or whether cloud is a product where you need to know what you want to do before going cloud, etc., etc. So that's what we will try and discuss from a technological point of view, from a political, regulatory point of view. There are things to probably say on that side, but also from a human point of view. What does cloud contribute to our daily lives? Where does it help? Where is it beyond scope eventually? So that's the number of things which I would like to toss into the arena, so to speak, if you agree with me, Annika. Toss in the arena and then have our panel members react on that. Voilà.
Thank you very much, Jean-Philippe. Yes, I agree with you. I would also particularly be interested more in the topics that were also mentioned in the scenario, like what it means for sovereignty, for data sovereignty. How we can actually react to such a threat scenario in Europe, how the policymakers could react. So I'm looking forward to a discussion about these topics as well.
Voilà, and don't forget, gentlemen, that the European Commission is our host, and that this is the time of your life to get messages onto the top regulator in terms of the European Union. So this is the last wink I will give into that. Raphael, any thoughts, any lines? What did the scenario tell to you, except that the author probably is a nut, which I take from me?
Yeah, the scenario sounds very good to us and to me, especially due to the fact that EBRC pledged for a long time for European, let's say, sovereignty, and that's a perfect scenario for the time being. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, Xavier, a quick feedback on the scenario. Did that kind of ring a bell with you? Are there things where you say, or is BCE moving into that direction?
Yeah, definitely BCE going into that direction with also new solutions. But I fully agree with Annika and Raphael. Watching the regulatory from other countries worldwide, Europe needs to defend and protect also their people. We started to do it. but we can go beyond by creating also European-wide champions or solutions.
European-wide champions, that is a subject which we will get to, because that is that licorne argument which appears every once in a while. Should Europe have somebody, a company or some kind of organizational structure which would be able to compete with our competition, sorry, I was looking for the word, for our competition in the US or the Western Hemisphere, but also potential competition from the Eastern Hemisphere. Let's not forget that there are a few things also moving on that side. Steffen, a quick feedback on the scenario, anything, ideas from your side or something which buzzed on your end?
Well, the overall scenario is, to me, is very newspaper-like style, because it's it sounds like there's a very powerful attacker, like a natural catastrophe. We can't do anything about it, but 99% of the attacks are in fact script kiddies and bad protected small and medium-sized infrastructures. So I think it's not the big attacker Quana lock we should fear, but the lack of security skills, basics, because every script kiddie can hack a lot of stuff. And the scenario with cloud, it's very ambitious, because spawn a Europe-wide cloud that is adopted also, which affects a lot of marketing in 12 months is pretty ambitious, but it's a cool scenario. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Laurent, there are a few things which you already were alluding to, like skill sets which need to come or need to be developed, etc. But also that question of standardization, and do we really have the basics in order to set up a European cloud? Your reaction on the scenario and also on those things, please.
So I think the scope is very large, and we need to take care not to make it too complex, because we can go in several directions. So at least as a minimum a starting point for the scenario, I think we need to separate in our discussion what is about a utilization standpoint, how we protect those who are investing on the cloud, versus an industrial provider standpoint, how we need to control and set the rules for those who are providing services for European customers. And I've heard a lot of time mixing of the two. When we speak about European cloud, are we speaking about protecting European investment on the cloud, which is from a utilization standpoint, versus are we helping and shaping a real industrial model to have a real infrastructure fully European based? And for me, the two are very different, and the standard and the dynamic and the regulation to be adapted. So that's, in a short, I think, a way to simplify the classification of the consideration and input we'll provide from a usage standpoint versus from a provider standpoint.
Okay, any reaction on that, gentlemen?
Actually, maybe from my side also. So you mean this would have implications for the regulatory intervention? But how do you see that actually influencing the regulator? Okay.
We did 3 years ago a tentative which was named Open Cloud Foundation in Europe, and I was at this time leading OVH. For me, the only regulation we are talking about is the European. National regulation, for me, has no value for Europe. We need to focus on European level. And when we speak about regulation, it's very much about setting the rules. And GDPR has been a great success at individual level. We need now to have a GDPR type of set of rules for enterprise investment and public sector investment. We have been successful in Europe to set GDPR and to see expansion in other geography, and we can do the same in terms of structuring the rules. That's one element. And next, we need to let industrial people who know the technology to implement some standard compliant to these rules. And I don't see a very an easy to implement solution where regulatory will have to take care of technical standards. They need to be very clear on the principles and rules. And for those who have started to read Gaia X, I think it's a good start to set some rules and principles. But we need to be, according to these rules, very clear on, from an industry standpoint, on how we demonstrate the implementation of these rules in different set of technology. And the two need to work together, and we need to have very well balanced structure between setting the rules and principles and being sure that we have the right governance on the technical side to demonstrate the implementation of these rules. And it will not be a single one-size-fits-all type of color. We can't have a dream world like open source or whatever, which does not exist as a magic solution. So we need to be very pragmatic, but very strict in the way we will control how industry will implement these rules.
Steffen, you said that you found the overall scenario slightly overkill. I mean, I'm interpreting your words, that's fine. Being a press article, obviously it always has to, but it was also meant to slightly shake the coconut tree and wake up a few people. Now, if you take what Laurent said on the regulatory side, and also we will get to standardization questions and things like that. How do you see regulation go when on the other side the menace is a menace where you say it really is very granular? It's not the big attacks, it's not the big problems or the big players which are really the ones to watch. It is really Mr. Everybody virtually. How are you going to cope? And then the other question, which I also would like to table with the panel, is regulatory going, or are regulatory aspects going to help us defend a European cloud or a cloud system against attacks?
Okay, let me start with the second question. I don't think so that regulation, at least just regulation, can do anything to make us defeat such attacks, because we have a lot of standardization. There are a bunch of security information standards, a lot of worldwide, some for Europe only. You have GDPR, and one main problem we see in our daily pen testing is, in the end, the people have a bunch of papers to say it a little downside. They have a bunch of papers, and no one actually thinking like an attacker did prove, are this bunch of papers really proving that the regulation is implemented the right way. So for the lawful side, they have a bunch of papers. So if if the lawyers come, they say, oh, we did everything we need to do, but the attacker, script kiddie sitting at home, doesn't care, and maybe breaks in, the window is closed, and it breaks in through the other window, which nobody did care of. So what we need is more thinking like an attacker, and more educational skills to make people able to really control those implementations and make sense out of them, because there are regulations enough, and everyone has its bunch of GDPR papers, but in the end, it's not very much more secure. Yeah, so there's this balance.
Okay.
I think if I may rebound on this, from the pandemic situation that we just had, it shows exactly this point that papers and regulatory is indeed very good, and maybe we need to improve faster the European regulatory and the set of rules, as Laurent said. But indeed, if we want to be flexible and scalable and be able to face most of the crisis type, cloud is a very good solution, where the basics of this is indeed security, which cannot be put over or open side.
Raphael, same point to you. You have announced yesterday quite an ambitious projects bringing cloud into the sky, so to speak. You can eventually talk about that. How are you going to cope with the security aspects on that side? And also, this being a multinational project, the regulatory aspects of it. Because of the European part, obviously.
I come back to the point that Laurent mentioned. I think today's challenge is about the data and the cooperation between those two worlds, between the provider and the technology, and also the use cases. So that's typically the beauty of the Gaia-X ambition, just announced 1 year ago by the German and French delegates from the Minister of Economy, but also the industry, to pursue some objective to create more sovereignty on the cloud, but also decentralized process, location, and more transparent condition for clouds. So that's the cooperation between the two is absolutely necessary to go in that way. That's the announcement we made yesterday was emphasizes this topic for space techs, spatial technologies on the cloud, just as an illustration.
Okay.
If I may add one point, if possible, Jean-Philippe?
Yes, go on.
Yeah. I think we are talking about security and protection. From my knowledge of use cases and unfortunately successful attacks, I see more on the legacy world versus cloud world. Purely from a security standpoint, protecting the data, ransomware, stopping the business, etc. We have seen a lot of unfortunate cases over the last few months where traditional IT has been stopped because of attack. So the protection, we could develop on it, but the level of protection required such an investment, such a sophisticated set of capabilities, such a large bandwidth to resist against anti-DDoS attack, etc., that almost all of the traditional IT have not been able to invest at the right level because it's a huge investment. When you go to cloud, this is a core business. So the cloud service provider, if they don't protect, if they don't have the bandwidth to protect on DDoS attack, if they don't have the firewall up to date, etc., it's a core business which is at risk. So by statistic, and if somebody disagrees, I will be pleased, but what I've seen over the last few years is that in terms of massive attack, most of the significant attack on the legacy. So the problem with the cloud is not as number one seen being on security, but much more on compliance. How I will ensure that my data are not exposed to any risk of copy, how I protect the Daily Cloud Act, etc. And for me, this concern is clearly a real and very valid concern which has not been fixed. I hope Gaia-X will help to improve the set of rules, but this is in terms of importance of consideration on the cloud, what I see as the biggest concern in terms of compliance and governance and control, more than the pure classic security hacking.
Just one remark on this, sorry to interrupt, but security is still a very big consideration when you are considering cloud services, especially because indeed attacks on traditional IT are working very well, but if we are looking at data breach, usually they're coming from cloud services that are incorrectly secured or incorrectly configured. So when talking about like multi-cloud services or S3 storage or stuff like this, always a company needs to pay attention, and that's where regulatory is important, or at least standards. Pay attention to its own configuration, because the owner of the data, the company, cannot leave the full responsibility to the provider.
Yeah. There is this point in the regulation that says pseudonymity is one thing you can do, but We test so many companies, and they really don't care about the pseudonymity thing. For in example, they have the document that says, okay, we're GDPR compliant, but there are so many cases where they can adopt pseudonymity, and for this reason give an attacker that may steal the data and not the ability to correlate it with names or something. They don't think of it, because I think it's a lack of knowledge in this point, that they don't see that at some point they can do technical conceptual things that lead an attacker in an empty attack. And this is one point I want to say to Laurent. I don't see that there is huge invests needed in security in terms of products or big resources. I see there are small conceptual things you can do, like the Titanic principle. If someone breaks in, of course, the one thing I want to do is he's stuck where he is. So, okay, he may break in, but he's stuck there. But in the year 2020, people are still able to break down companies with a ransomware attack on starting on one system. So it's not that we need fancy AI stuffed firewall and monitoring things. It's more that there are people that know how an attacker acts and do conceptual things to make it an attacker heavy to attack. So it's not that we need software, I think it's that we need skills.
I'm glad to react on this point. This is absolutely valid, but at the same time, we have seen an increase of risk, but we have seen an increase of best-of-breed specific solutions, and it required a serious level of expertise to manage the right understanding of what's the new risk and how I expose myself versus what kind of solution. We did at VMware a very high-level analysis of the security landscape of product, and we have seen multiple hundreds of solutions to tackle the different domain. Imagine you are just as a doctor, you are a doctor, and you need to inject in your head hundreds and hundreds of possible medicine treatment for different issues. How you do that? It's very complex. So what we see in terms of trend is that the major actors in developing end-to-end solution from the device, which is now mobile, not controlled by the company, which required a series of very well-controlled entries on the system, to the network, which is also in the public, because you are at home and you use your own network, to the connection point, to a series of services. Some are out of the company, are SaaS-based, some are in the company. And I will continue if I want this way, but when you put all of these elements, which are real life today with the pandemic, you work from home with your device, you go outside and you work with your smartphone, etc., and you use applications which are not limited to your own data centers. All of that does not remove the accountability of the IT guy. He is still accountable, and if something happens, the CEO will fire the guy because he's not doing the right job. But the guy is facing this complexity of new risks and hundreds of solutions. And when I say hundreds, it's more than 1,000 in fact. When you look at the full landscape, and it's too complex. It's too complex. So we need integrated solution. We need to help him.
It's because the IT guy, the IT administrative guy, and the security guy, it's two complete different positions. It's different from thinking, it's different from acting, and this is something that hasn't, at least in the small companies, they aren't aware of, that the IT guy is the one who's responsible that everything's working fine, and that the head of product said, okay, I need an application. The application is there, but there must be some other guy, some other position that is the security position. So it's because of the different landscapes and the attacks amounts and the different thinking, we need to have two positions for this, and therefore I see. I think it will be there in a few years, a kind of regulation that says everyone needs a security guy within his company. I think this will help on this case. And on the other hand, yes, there are thousands of different attacks, but in the end, it's all about attack surface. So in the past years, we had it that there were buffer overflows and all that stuff, and they hacked the websites or whatever, or the exposed services, and then made their way down to some other systems. But since years, it's more or less the same. It's always the email thing. So why does still someone send emails in HTML formatted? I don't understand. If we all would send in text only, we shouldn't have that much problem. Why are emails not signed by S-MIME? It's there since 1993. So this is some basic stuff. If everyone would adopt, we at least have some basic security there. Yeah.
Raphael, I haven't heard you.
Yeah, do not forget that also everything is nowadays interconnected. In terms of service, the entire value chain is completely interconnected. This means also that in terms of security, if someone fails in the chain, that's probably the weakest element that create trouble for all the value chain. That's also important. Also in terms of innovation, to accelerate innovation, we need probably more and more data, and data is the growing segment for the innovation for sure. And to be sure that the data is available at the right time, at the right moment, with the right patterns in terms of security too, it's also very important that we have some coordination somewhere. And for now, we see, for example, the accumulation of data spaces dedicated to specific industries. You can have imagine a data space, a data lake, for example, for healthcare, where searcher, doctors, pharma, big techs can exchange patents data to find new medicine or new treatments and accelerate again the potential of exploiting cloud technologies in a secure way. So that's very important to see the entire ecosystem bringing all the element in a value chain.
From what I heard from all of you until now, I was wondering whether all that was not really pleading for an European-wide initiative, eventually going even way beyond Gaia-X, because when I'm hearing that from Laurent, that security is difficult, skill sets are missing, we are speaking about tremendous investments in order to build those cloud ecosystems, etc., etc. Are we not going to say by that indirectly that we are moving into what is currently happening with Euro HPC, for example, a similar structure, kind of public-private partnership with the European Union involved and with a number of major players, or am I missing something?
I think we have two considerations at least. One is brand new investment for delivering added value services by vertical, energy, health, fintech, etc. I think Gaia-X will help to structure and harmonize some of this technology standardization and guiding principles to put together energy for a specific objective. And I think Gaia-X, the intention is clearly stated to help these vertical data services to be developed in a better way for European needs. Now, there is the mass majority of the problem is still in the hand of the existing enterprise with their existing systems being connected for global reasons to US, to China, to Asia, etc. And this story that you have just explained for me it will not disappear with a European initiative. What I expect is that, as we have done for GDPR, if we continue to lead the structuring of the setting of the rules and principles, both building, managing security, etc., and we find the right standard of technology to comply with these rules, the intention is to be able to push more on a global basis the deployment of this principle, as we have done for GDPR, because for classic business, for existing enterprise systems, we can't limit the connection to European players. It will not work. So we need to find something which is efficient, easy to deploy. GDPR for me is a good reference. It has been well accepted, and we have seen the positive of it. Very different from brand new investment where we can be very selective, being fully compliant to a set of standard principles, select the partners we want to work with, building in a very under control environment, etc. So I think we have at least these two cases very different in terms of agenda.
Back to your question with if it's possible to make such a European cloud. I think we have to listen to the market, because Amazon wasn't there and was a big cloud. It was a service that feeded the needs of the users, and in the end, this cloud scenario or this big European cloud must be used by end users, and we need to catch the end users. And I don't think you catch them if you build up a huge cloud scenario and just place it there, and in the end, no one's really using it. So I think it has to be grown. It has to be something innovative, something cool, and then maybe it can increase and be a big European cloud. But I don't think the way could be building such a big project and just place it there and then think of people will use it. So I think we have to feed the needs of the users. It's in the end, it's market, it's capitalistic. So we need to, you can't just place it there and then say, okay, people will use it. So I think, it has to be something cool, something innovative, something people like, and then it can grow up to cool cloud. At least my opinion. I'm not cloud person.
Yeah, maybe to jump in on that, from the perspective of a business association, of course we are always in favor of having a competitive market, and indeed it's very important, like also to make this point towards the regulator to say, hey, yes, we think all these considerations are very important, but indeed it has to be accepted by the market, otherwise this is not going to work. It has to be market driven. And so I don't know if anyone else would have any thoughts on this.
I might join actually Laurent. It should be driven by the market, but at least maybe governments or public entities can work together with the innovators or the make to grow company in Europe to actually do the first steps and do the first help. Maybe we should have maybe more European mass invasion. When you see on the west part the US who are very protectionism, and on the east part also China that is growing very fast with big investment. It could be a help to have this public-private link approach to make this first step to start the machine.
Well, could it be that you read the scenario, the storyline, and one of the ideas or proposals between inverted commas which is shared there is that what I called Robin Hood is that kind of decentralized edge cloud. Would that be a first step to use to kind of federate all the small cloud providers into some kind of loose structure in order to get really the feedback from the market, set the base, and then build on that?
No, if I'm being controversial, I don't think. Edge is mandatory for brand new type of services that we need to develop for new use cases. We have needs, for example, in a supermarket. When you go to the supermarket like Amazon Go and you identify the person by face recognition, you identify the the goods and the items that the person is taking, the client is taking, and you charge directly his credit card when he's leaving the shop. All of that requires a huge capacity of treatment, of data analysis, etc., which is very much edge computing as well, 5G for car, whatever, and manufacturing. All of that is brand new investment, and what you call existing and legacy cloud provider have no investment capacity to get to this level. Mm-hmm. But we have two considerations for the legacy cloud provider, small one. First, GAIA-X should help setting some standard to interconnect this cloud provider. For example, a tier 2 or tier 3 cloud provider from Germany, Luxembourg, connected to a tier 2 provider or tier 3 provider of Switzerland and France could be connected for a European company having needs in the different geography. So we have, thanks to GAIA-X, a series of standards for interoperability, which will help to have a more extended capacity where small and mid-sized players will have an opportunity. That's one. And the second opportunity I see on the market is that for a good reason, we see some vertical specialists on very specific segments where they want to control the full stack from A to Z, on health, on fintech or other, where for good reasons they want to very focus on a single business objective, and we see some cloud service provider being well adapted to, thanks to their portfolio of clients, to focus on a very specific domain of retail, fintech, health, or whatever, and provide very specific services adapted to the needs, and just specialists of these needs without being the generalist that they can't afford anymore. So that's the two trends. One is interoperability, thanks to GAIA-X, with a series of standards to facilitate interconnection, and the second is some transformation of cloud provider be associated with SaaS providers and functions providers, specialists on a particular segment.
Any reactions, gentlemen?
Yeah, do not forget again the power of the user in that space. In GAIA-X, there is multiple stakeholders involved in the project. There is for sure CSPs and cloud providers, but also research industries and universities. But the vast majority of the participants are coming from the user side, and that's the first initiative I see include from the beginning the community of users and their needs. So they are there for expressing the need and co-create within the possibility to extend, thanks to, as Laurent mentioned, the interoperability of the model within different cloud service provider, including HPC technologies, including edge technologies, including IoT or 5G technologies. That's a very important point. That's the federation of service that GAIA-X intend to create. Let's see.
You're answering a question which I was going to ask, Raphael, is exactly that. Do we know with building on a cloud ecosystem, which is kind of a polymer structure which evolves into a panoply of different directions, do we really know what the user wants and what the user will want in a near future? Because we are not building that for the needs of today, we are building for the needs of tomorrow and afterwards. So thank you for responding to a question I was going to ask. Any reaction on what Raphael said from the other gentleman? Because I have another question still. No? Okay, the other question is, and I think this also addresses part of what Annika has in mind when we speak about sovereignty in the environment of the cloud. Do we have the technology to be able to afford that sovereignty or to be able to drive that sovereignty? If we take apart Southeast Asia on the one side, and if we take apart the Western Hemisphere on the other? Do we have in Europe, I mean, we addressed the skill set, which is an issue, which is an important issue, but do we have the technology? Big silence.
Again, I'm not a cloud specialist, but I know GitHub, and I know there are a lot of good programmers in Europe, and there are, beside open source technology, there's a lot of closed source stuff in Europe, which is also good. So I don't see that there is not the technology. The internet is still wider than Europe. So of course we can adapt, copy, replace, maintain other technologies. I don't see that the technology is not there. I don't see that. It's the skills.
I would like to restate what has been said a few minutes ago, but it's a user decision. If you look from a technology standpoint, tons of technology exists since many years. Why users, enterprise, did not select local technology? We have a very good German company, Open Exchange. They do a great job on a suite of collaboration tools, and it's still a marginal fraction of the market that they have been able to penetrate, not because the technology is not there, but because users does not want to change from Office 365. As well, if I talk about OVH, if I talk about T-System, if I talk about Outscale or whatever cloud provider, it exists since 20 years. Why companies have said, okay, it exists, but I prefer AWS. And we need to understand the decision-making process on the business side, because honestly, the chicken and egg on this question is not an easy question to say, do we have the technology, but are we ready to use local European technology? Yes or no? And at the end of the day, I think it will be a question of controlling, because the ideal world of a full European stack of solution, I don't think it's good. I think it's very important to continue to share what we can, but under control. What we have seen over the last few years is that the risk and the exposure, like Cloud Act for the hyperscaler on cloud, is not well managed by the users. So they are buying services, they don't know the consequence of what they are buying. So we need to educate, we need, once again, GAIX will help also to have a better understanding of the profile of risk, exposure to regulation, non-European regulation. And when the client, it's like for the organic food, when you go to the supermarket and you have a very clear description of, oh, this food is organic, this one is not. You start to think about, okay, what does that mean for me? Do I want to save something in terms of sense, or do I want to protect my health? So this kind of decision, if we have a good framework for education, clarification of the challenge, etc., it will help, but the technology itself, there is no magic day tomorrow where everything will be available and it was not yesterday, because a lot exists, but it will be more how for this particular needs I'm going to select a European solution versus on this one I understand what I'm doing, but for good reason I'm going to continue with a US or a Chinese provider because I know what I'm doing and it's under control. So for me the most important is to be sure that we have a good transparency, a good fairness and a good structuring of the description of the different services, the different building blocks, because by the end it will be a customer choice.
Any reaction, final round, because time flies as I see.
I can make one short point. I think regarding the example with Open Exchange, I think it's a marketing thing. Amazon just did better marketing. No one knows Open Exchange alternatives except nerds or tech guys. This is. I think this is a problem because I completely agree. The technology is it's fine. You can use Office 365 or Open Exchange. It's more or less the same, at least in the basic feature set, which fits most of the needs. So I think it's a marketing question, and this is also the at least my answer for the second point, that people know why to use a local cloud and prefer it over overseas cloud or stuff like that. It's also marketing, I think. It's also information that needs to come to the end user and that the end user doesn't have, and the end user opens up the internet and sees the big clouds, and then he just goes there.
Xavier, Raphael, a short final word?
Yes, I think on me, I agree on the marketing side, but maybe also because in the past years, Europe was maybe a bit behind in terms of innovative pace. And then we let the room to others with maybe less regulatory requirements to really push up for usability and being really user-oriented. But I think on the other side, Laurent pointed out a very good point, and I think related to security, companies should start thinking about risk management. And what's the risk of using a player where you're not sure where it's going to, and what's the risk? Maybe use local players. If we take, for example, the Internet of Things, people can now buy cameras for their home private security, and usually those cameras are going into China. A very useful way is to use the hub, but the hub, usually the video recordings are going through China before coming back to your phone. Are people aware of that? And that's part of the risk management as well as a little bit security. And that's where we should maybe push up a little bit more in Europe to say, okay, let's use European players, because here we know who is doing what, we know most of the chain players and what's the risk.
Yes, for my part, I would like to invite you, if you want to have more information, to follow the discussion within the European Commission and the data strategy putting in place right now, and also the European Cloud Federation just signed last month by some European countries during the German presidency of the Council. So also, I'm not sure if you have the ubiquity capabilities, but if you can follow a second conference tomorrow and after tomorrow, there will be the GaiaX Summit tomorrow, so probably there will be some announcement on there. Don't hesitate to follow the ambition of GaiaX. I think it's a major topic for the coming next weeks and months, and after that.
Thank you. Annika, questions, thoughts, remarks? You get the final word.
Well, firstly, I wanted to thank all the panelists, because it's been extremely interesting. I really like the different points of view that were brought into the discussion. Also these points on being business or being oriented towards understanding the decisions of the individuals or the companies, and really tailoring this in a market-driven way. So finally, on a micro economic basis, I think this is very important as well. And what I also thought I wanted to highlight at the end is that you were talking a lot about skills, education, and the level of understanding that someone needs to take an informed decision about their own data or their own the way they interact with digital tools, etc. So this is also something we've been looking into at an organization, because in the end, I think it is important, if you want to be sovereign as a continent or as a political entity. Indeed, you need the citizens everyone has to be able to take autonomous decisions and to understand what consequences they have for their own data security or for themselves. So this is a very important point, which is not just relevant here in this discussion, but in general when it comes to digitalization, digital transformation. So you need autonomous people to be informed, to take autonomous decisions on this. Otherwise, you can't really build sovereignty as a political entity either.
Thank you everybody. So in summary, basically, we have the technology, We know what the customer wants, or at least we are very close to what the user wants or needs. We have an issue with the skill set, and we probably need to do better marketing. And down the line, we may end up with a situation where today everybody buys organic because people trust organic. People buy appellation d'origine contrôlée wines because they trust the appellation d'origine contrôlée of French wines. Maybe we have to end up with an appellation d'origine contrôlée of a European cloud service and then cover a number of the issues which we discussed this morning. Thank you very much, Annika. Thank you very much, gentlemen.